Hello everyone. Now you will hear a short summary of the movie Novocaine. Enjoy watching. Nate drank his blended breakfast and went to work at the bank. The man was bored during the planning meeting until a young intern Sherry came into the branch. Nate is a good man. He promised Earl to make a deferment on the loan so that the man would not lose his house. The banker always drinks coffee only with ice. Sherry distracted him and Nate spilled boiling water on his hand, but did not even notice it. The girl was scared. The burn looked serious, but Nate assured her that nothing bad had happened. Sherry, as an apology, invited the boss to lunch. Nate initially refused, but then decided that this was his chance to arrange his personal life and still went with Sherry to a cafe, but flatly refused to try cherry pie. It was time to admit that he has a genetic disorder. Nate doesn't feel pain, heat, or cold. He doesn't eat solid food so as not to accidentally bite off his tongue. If he steps on a nail, he'll only know it when his shoe fills with blood. This has happened before. Despite his fear, Nate still agreed to try the pie from Sherry's hands.
What? This is pie?
Yeah.
This is pie. Pie?
Nate has only one friend, with whom he communicates online during the game. Roscoe convinced him to go on a proper date with Sherry. Their conversation was interrupted by Nate's former classmate. He called our hero Novocaine, his school nickname.
It's fucking Novocaine, and he's not fucking dead!
This idiot and other guys constantly beat up Nate because he didn't feel anything anyway. Suddenly, the alarm went off on the clock. This happens every 3 hours. It reminds Nate that it's time to go to the toilet. Otherwise, his bladder will burst one day. When Nate returned, Sherry was already chatting sweetly with his classmate. The girl suggested that they have a drink together and forget past grievances. Nate knocked back a shot and didn't even wince, but the asshole immediately started coughing. This cocktail had chili pepper.
You can put those on his tab. Done.
Sherry wanted to go home to Novocaine. She took off Nate's shirt and saw that his entire body was covered in tattoos. Sherry wondered if her colleague was feeling pleasure. Nate answered positively, and Sherry gave him pleasure. The next day, Nate was in a good mood. He couldn't take his eyes off the intern, and was about to approach her to invite her on another date. But then a gang of Santa Clauses burst into the bank. They laid everyone on the floor and ordered the manager to open the vault. Someone managed to press the alarm button. They only had 3 minutes before the police arrived. The leader beat the manager so hard that his beard flew off. The robber immediately blew the witness's brains out. Next he started to work on Nate, but he didn't react to the blows at all. Sherry stopped the beating and thus drew attention to herself. The criminal threatened to kill her. Nate got scared and immediately gave the code to the vault. He was knocked out and the Santa Clauses filled the bags with cash. At that moment, the police arrived. The robbers took the sheriff hostage. The policemen agreed to put their guns on the ground and the thugs immediately shot them. Reinforcements arrived. The bandits continued to kill the cops. Nate came to his senses and realized that the robbers took the love of his life. He needed to act. He helped the wounded cop, took his gun, and stole a police car. The robbers got away in 2 cars. They noticed a tail, so they decided to split up. Nate cornered one criminal, but when Ben realized that a cop with a pistol was pointing at him, he easily knocked the gun out. The barrel flew into the restaurant kitchen. The persistent clerk is not far behind him. Ben tried to shoot Nate, but Nate knocked the gun away with a hot frying pan. He immediately did not notice how he received third-degree burns. Ben began to beat the annoying banker.
Hey, last chance. Tell me where she is.
Eat shit.
Nate somehow fought back with the help of food. Ben, sprinkled with flour, got angry and grabbed a hatchet, but Nate reacted faster. He stuck his hand in boiling oil to get a gun and blew out the robber's brains. His hand was scalded, but he remained alive. The accomplices sent Ben a message that they got to work. Nedge took a photo of Ben's tattoo and fled the crime scene in his car. The man asked his friend in the game to find the parlor where this tattoo was done. The police believe that Nej may be an accomplice of the robbers. It was he who opened the vault and went after the criminals. Nate asked Carol for help, but Novocaine pulled the bullet out of his arm with pliers and sealed the wound with superglue. However, after the operation, he almost lost consciousness, so he had to inject himself with epinephrine, which acts like adrenaline. In gratitude, Nate gave his grandpa 2 packs of bucks so that he could finally pay off the loan. Roscoe found the right tattoo parlor and sent its address to Nate. The other 2 bandits arrived at their lair. Andre is worried that his brother Bent still hasn't shown up and isn't answering his calls. There was a hostage sitting at the table who turned out not to be a hostage at all, but an accomplice of the robbers. True, everything got out of control. Simon promised Sherry that no one would get hurt, but on the contrary, he started shooting like crazy. The girl was supposed to seduce Nate and get the code to the vault out of him, but she didn't have time to do it. The banker came to the tattoo parlor. The artist turned out to be a huge Nazi.
Fuck. What's happening with your hand?
Psoriasis. Really flared up on me today.
Yeah, alright.
Nate showed Zen a photo of Ben's tattoo and asked him to get the same one. The brute knew the murdered criminal. Novocaine tried to find out his last name. Xena didn't like this, so he armed himself with a knife just in case, but Nate had already pointed a gun at him. Suddenly, his assistant knocked the gun out. Xena himself accidentally knocked out the woman's teeth. Now he's going to tear this weakling apart, but the idea of jumping on him from above was unsuccessful. Xena got furious and smashed the mirror with his opponent, showering everything around him with shards. Nate decided to take advantage of the situation and started hammering these shards into his fists. After that, the frostbitten clerk slashed Zen's face and even blinded him. To finally make the big guy talk, Nate started crossing out the swastika on his neck with a tattoo machine. The big guy finally gave in. Nate found out where Ben lived and, in order not to forget the address, tattooed it on his arm. Andre decided to stop by his brother's house and make sure that everything was okay with him, but Nate was the first to arrive there. Ben was quite paranoid, so he filled his home with all sorts of traps. Nate hit a tripwire and felt pressure in his back. A metal ball with spikes pierced him. Any other uninvited guest would have already been writhing in pain, but not Nate. Another surprise awaited the clerk in the kitchen. An arrow pierced his leg.
Crossbow. Under the sink. Of course.
Nate continued to wander around the house with an arrow in his leg. He found Ben's uniform and found out WHE. Alas, he couldn't leave the house. Nate fell into another trap and was hanging on a rope above the floor. Again, he had to call his friend from the internet and ask him for help. Roscoe, though, agreed he would get here on his Harley in about 15 minutes. At that moment, Andre entered the house. Nate tried to lie to him that he was an ordinary thief, but then why was the address of this house carved on his arm? Simon called. He heard on the police radio that Ben had been killed. It was done by some skinny guy in a suit. Andre realized that his brother's killer was now hanging in front of him, and he would torture him for a very long time and cruelly. The criminal sat Nate on a chair and began to twist the arrow in his legs.
Oh! No! Stop it! This is bad! God damn it!
Roscoe will be here in a couple of minutes. He needs to stall for time. Andre took a pair of pliers and pulled out a couple of his victim's nails. Alas, the sadist had to hurry, so he moved on to his favorite procedure, cutting out eyeballs. Now Nate was really scared. Luckily, Roscoe came to the rescue and knocked Andre out. The friends said that he looked like Jason Momoa, but in reality he was a 5-foot-tall Humpty Dumpty. The friends were about to leave, but Andre came to his senses and attacked Nate. Roscoe got a knife and threw it to his friend, but the blade pierced Nate's palm. Roscoe corrected himself and began to spray the bandit with bear spray. Suddenly the trap worked and the biker's helmet was hit with a sledgehammer. Andre got it too. Bricks fell on his head. The scumbag began to strangle Nate. He remembered the arrow in his leg and pierced the bandit's head.
Jesus. Hell of a way to go.
Huh?
A few minutes later, the police arrived at the house. Nate was ordered to get out with his hands up, but instead he jumped on Harley Roscoe and ran. However, he soon stopped. Under the helmet was the happy Harry Roscoe. However, in handcuffs it was no longer funny. Chubby promised to tell the cops where they could find Nate. Sherry rebelled and refused to run away with Simon because he was a killer and she was not one. Nate burst into the garage and pointed a gun at the robber. Simon laughed and told the banker that Sherry was his adopted sister. The girl tries to convince Nate that everything they had was real. She really has feelings for him. Nate's body is working at the limit. He lost concentration. Thanks to this, Simon was able to close the distance and knock him out with a couple of blows. The scumbag was going to crush his head with a car, but at the last moment Sherry ran into her brother.
Honestly, just go. Take the money and go. I'm gonna stay with him.
Simon put a gun to his sister's head. A shot rang out, but the cops who arrived shot the bandit himself. It's a good thing Roscus gave Nate to the police, otherwise he would have lost his head. Nate was chained to a stretcher and thrown into an ambulance. But everyone apparently forgot about Simon. He came to and shot a police officer, dropped his partners. Sherry was able to escape, but the thug shot the paramedic and stole the ambulance. Sherry helped the policewoman get into the car and went after Simon. She knows that her brother is waiting for a boat at the port. Nate came to and is trying to free himself from the handcuffs. He managed to reach the fire extinguisher. All that's left is to break his finger. Nate did it. Now he needs to somehow stop Simon. He found a defibrillator, put the electrode to himself, and grabbed the bandit's face with his hand. Simon received an electric shock, lost control, and the car flipped over. But the bandit wasn't really hurt. He attacked Nate and started strangling him. He fought back with a scalpel. A policewoman and Sherry arrived at the port. The woman had lost a lot of blood. She gave her service weapon to the criminal, and Roscoe took her to the hospital. Simon emerged victorious from the fight, so that the clerk couldn't resist anymore. He broke his hand. Now there's a bone sticking out where the hand used to be. However, he didn't manage to finish off Nate. Sherry shot her brother. The girl came too close to him. Because of this, Simon was able to take the gun and started beating Sherry. Nate saw a syringe with adrenaline on the pavement, somehow crawled to it and gave himself an injection. Thanks to this, he got to his feet and killed Simon, plunging his protruding bone into his head, after which he passed out. The clerk woke up in the hospital. The man suffered heart failure, a brain hemorrhage, and almost all of his bones were broken. Doctors kept him in a coma for 3 weeks. Nate committed many crimes, but saved the life of a police officer, so he only received 5 years probation. Sherry, on the other hand, is serving a real sentence, but Nate will wait for her as long as it takes. And yes, he now eats pies without fear.